getting back to it, as again, always thank you to everyone who's tagging in from the different school districts, the different campuses, virtually on your own tablet or in a classroom setting. It's really cool to have y'all join us. And honestly, TILBM really appreciates and values the honor and opportunity we have to support your school districts. A special thank you to Fort Worth ISD, Birdville ISD, for being some of the forerunners that have allowed us to grow this program and create some great partnerships. Thank you to Texas A&M Commerce for very generously offering to provide scholarships and seed funds for our Parchment Fellows, as well as the ISDs that we work with. That's a big deal, and we really value it. And then, of course, above all else for today, a really big thank you to Mr. Blake Vaughn for sharing a lot of your time with us. We really appreciate it. We know you're incredibly busy, and phasing into your bio, the students are going to understand how busy you are right now. So Blake Vaughn is a seasoned businessman in the fields of construction, logistics, administrative support services, and capital raising through his companies Patriot Delivery, Vita Nova Construction, and Ignite Capital Group. Additionally, Vaughn is a certified leadership development coach with the John Maxwell team and has consulted over 200 small businesses on automation, delegation, systems, processes, and culture building. Prior to launching his career in business, Vaughn served in the United States Navy as an officer aboard the USS Chaffee, engaging in surface warfare operations and special projects for over 8 years, finishing his time in the public affairs section. Vaughn has earned his bachelor's of business administration and MBA at Dallas Baptist University, currently serves as an elected council member for the city of North Richland Hills, and has actively supported multiple nonprofits across the Dallas-Fort Worth area for quite a while. Thank you so much, Councilman Vaughn, for sharing your time with us. And I'm going to pass it on to you now, sir.
Sweet. Well, I'm getting a really bit of echo really quick. Give me 1 second. Can you hear me this way?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I think I'll go without the AirPods. Just give me 1 second. None. Gotcha. Okay. All right. Once again, is this good? Everybody can hear me? Ready to get started?
This is perfect on our end.
Perfect. I may have to switch over once we get to questions because I could barely hear you, but I don't want to take too much time. Hello, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity, this really a privilege to get to speak with so many of you. I know that you guys you folks have been willing to put in the extra effort that it takes to make a real impact on the world. So it's a big deal to me to actually have that opportunity to get to speak with you. I'm excited because I didn't expect to be here. When you look back at my life and some of the struggles that I've experienced and that my family has experienced, you'd understand that, you know, I say it's only by the grace of God that I'm actually here with you today and to have that opportunity to speak with you. So it really means a lot to me. I hope that hearing my story will be able to, you'll be able to take something away and hopefully even be able to achieve a certain level of significance in your life that you otherwise would not have believed that you could achieve. You've probably heard this before, but people are kind of like rubber bands, right? If you think about a rubber band, I'm sure maybe someone said this in school already, but you know, you got to have that right amount of tension on a rubber band in order for it to fulfill its purpose. If you think of like a deck of cards, you want to kind of hold the deck of cards together with that rubber band. You got to wrap it around a few times, you know, to get it really tight so that it will hold those cards. But if you wrap it too tight, if you put too much stress on that rubber band, it'll actually pop and it'll break, right? But if you don't put enough stress on that rubber band, it just kind of hangs limp there or whatever, then it fails to fulfill its purpose. It's not going to be able to hold that deck of cards together. And I really think, I mean, that's just the constant imagery that I go back over in my mind when I think of my life and the level of stress, the level of difficulty that I personally have experienced along the path to getting me where I am here today. I like to start about 50 years ago, actually. I'm not that old, but I actually like to start telling people about my father. You know, it's a really interesting story. So he wasn't a wealthy man. In fact, he and my mother both grew up in the projects of East Dallas, over there where Baylor Hospital is now. They were what you would call dirt poor, right? They both came from a history of abuse and neglect and poverty and abandonment, etc. My father's highest level of educational achievement was ninth grade, right? He completed ninth grade. And my mom, she went a little bit further. She completed high school. So, good for her. One day, my father was actually in a bar fight. He and his friend were hanging out at the bar. His friend ended up stabbing someone, and I believe they died. It was murder, and his friend had to go to prison. And my dad was basically forced to go into the Army to straighten up his life. It was actually probably the best thing that could happen to him, or could have happened to him. It was a time, an opportunity to take a pause, to reassess his life, to reprioritize things. And when he left at age 21, he married my mom, who was very young at the time. His parents had died and basically left him in the position of raising his, I believe it was 9 brothers and sisters, and all while my mom was only 17 years old. So thrust into this level of responsibility for such a young person, both him and her, was pretty eye-opening, right? So a constant state of like the stress, this tension being placed on them. He began working at the post office for many years before one day he decided to branch out on his own, and he wanted to be an entrepreneur. He wanted to kind of own his time and have money and resources available to do things he wanted. And so he took that risk of entrepreneurship. Over the next 26 years or so, he actually grew that business to the equivalent of a $17 million business today, right? $17 million in revenue for a business at this point. He had the freedom that he was looking for, the freedom of money to enjoy life, to share his resources with others, to invest in things that he cared, that meant a lot to him, right? He had the freedom of time to spend hours with his family, to take off in the middle of the day, to bring his son lunch, lots of freedom in his time. But with that, he also had the freedom to be distracted by life, right? His eyes began to wander, and his heart began to wander from the things that he should have been focused on and committed to. He became an alcoholic. He was verbally and emotionally abusive to my mother. There wasn't a day in my first 16 years of life that I don't remember my father not screaming at my mother and calling her every single name in the book, and just a constant level of abuse and stress. And I felt that, you know what I mean? As a young kid, I don't know how old you are. You're all 7th grade, I believe it is, right? I keep looking at your faces if I go back and forth and whatnot. But that age that you're at, it was very critical. And the next few years, especially, 15, 16, 17, freshman coming into high school, sophomore, you're trying to find your identity, figure out who you are, and then dealing with this level of stress added on, this layers of stress added on outside of just your schoolwork, outside of trying to figure out your friendships and, what you're going to do in life and all that kind of stuff. So it was a pretty difficult situation to walk through myself. At the same time, my father also began a long-term affair. He actually had an affair on my mom for over 12 years. He was basically supporting an entire family on the side. And so it was just really, really difficult kind of growing up. At age 16, my father lost everything. He became so distracted by the things outside of his business, outside of his marriage, that he began to make a series of critical mistakes, right? And chief among those, just from a business perspective, he ended up putting all of his business, or about 70% of his revenue, in one basket. Putting all your eggs in one basket, right? He put 70% of his revenue and basically said one customer was allowed to have 70% of his entire company's revenue, and then overnight that customer got bought out and moved to Florida, and it destroyed his business overnight. Now the problem was that his identity was wrapped in his success financially, his success as a businessman, as a leader of not only his organization but in the the community. He was a speaker at different conferences. Like, he had reached this level of achievement and success as a leader in his community. And when this business was taken away from him, it basically pulled the rug out from under him, and he began to collapse. A few years later, he would die. But it was even more difficult, I think, for my mom. You see, he, at the same time that he lost his business, he abandoned his family. He left us. My mother, who had not worked in 15 years, was put in the position of trying to support me and two of my cousins who lived with us. So 3 kids, all by herself with no experience, didn't really know what to do, didn't know how to put food on the table. Our house ended up going into foreclosure. We luckily had a good, we had friends and family who were able to walk with us through that and kind of help us a little bit through it. But a very stressful time emotionally for, once again, a 16-year-old like me to walk through. And to try to stay focused on keeping your eye on the prize and those types of things in the midst of all that. It was devastating to her, but it was also difficult for me. Living in that environment for so many years, and basically just, you had these thoughts creep into your mind, or into my mind, this feeling of hopelessness, right? Hopelessness, like, I just don't know how I'm going to get out of this. How we are in such a difficult, I just don't know that I'm ever going to amount to anything in this particular area or in my life, right? I remember thoughts of ending my life. I don't know if any of y'all have ever felt that, but just the overwhelming stress of life coming to that breaking point. But luckily, my mom, she did her best to encourage me. She did her best to ground me spiritually, to ground me emotionally. I also had wonderful teachers. We've got maybe some teachers in the room today or whatnot. I had 2 teachers who, sorry, I'll get a little choked up. So let me try to get through this quick. But in those darkest moments of my life, there are 2 teachers specifically, Mr. Colin and Miss Monique Murchison, basically, that spoke into my life. They'd pull me into their classroom during lunch just to speak life into me, to pray with me, even to invest in me, to help me basically see the potential of my own life despite the circumstances. They were instrumental in helping me navigate that period. They saw this potential, and then they gave me opportunities for me to help see that potential in myself, whether it was like allowing me to create this little class on communications or whatnot myself, or forcing me to, not forcing me, but encouraging me to run for different leadership positions in the school and to try out for different sports that I was not a sports guy. My nickname growing up was Oompa Loompa, not by choice. All right. I was like Oompa Loompa. A kid made fun of me all the time, all this stuff. And it was pretty bad, right? It was pretty rough. Kids are mean, you guys know. But sorry, someone's calling me. There you go. Okay. Hopefully I'm back. All right. I should have put my do not disturb on. But anyway, Oompa Loompa, right? So, but they, I had a coach tell me, he's like, Blake, you're playing football. I'm like, Coach, I don't play football. I'm no good at football. He's like, I don't care. You're going to play. I had teachers put me into leadership positions or kind of encourage me to vote for it. And those little things, even though I didn't have the self-image or the self-confidence to do those things, they began to expose those areas of my life to push me out of my comfort zone and into that area of growth. And these are things that I want you to start thinking about as well. Like, you may not want to do these things. You may not think that you can do these things or that you'd be any good at any of these things. But it's actually through that process of taking those steps, of getting out of that comfort zone, that you begin to grow. And that's what these years are all about. Like these next 10 years of your life, especially, well, more than that, 10, 20 years, like these are growth periods of your life. These are when you're supposed to be taking risk and experiencing failure and those types of things. But going back to my mom real quick, something else I wanted to say, but I remember she was driving, we were driving down the freeway together, and I was mad about something. Like, kids always get mad and then they'll mouth off to their parents and whatnot. Okay, y'all know what I'm talking about. And I said something like, well, I just want to go live with my dad, right? And I remember that she just lost it. She emotionally lost it. She kind of had a mental breakdown while we were driving on the freeway. And I actually had to reach over and grab the wheel to keep us on the road. And that was, it was an eye-opening experience. It was a quick glance behind the strong woman facade, to see the depth of pain that she was doing her best to keep hidden from the world, if you know what I mean. It was just that momentary glance to see what was really happening. And that moment became kind of the driving force, or the motivation for my own life, to regain what was lost, to fight for what was lost in our family, to achieve a certain level of financial success or significance with my own life that had seemed lost, right? So that became a motivation. That failure became a motivation. You see, leaders, are y'all still with me, by the way? Everybody good? Give me a thumbs up or whatnot. Okay, cool. I like the 4 of you who keep your camera on, by the way. So leaders, you see, leaders are not intimidated by failure. Leaders are inspired by it. They see failure just not as they see failure as another step on the path to success, right? It's not a wrong turn, it's another step, okay? They're not deterred by failure, they're determined to succeed, right? These are the things that you have to begin to speak to yourself and to remind yourself about, that every one of these failures that you experience in life, every one of these struggles, they're actually building blocks that are making you into the person you're going to be. Every single difficult thing you go through is meant to improve you in some way, and you don't understand why. Lots of people, you don't understand why. My wife lost her first husband to leukemia. That was a devastating experience for her. But together, these things are working together, and we're learning through those, and we're becoming stronger people through those failures. And we have to keep our eye on the bigger picture, right? A lot of times you think of a forest, right? If you have your nose right up on a tree, you only see one tree. You're missing the bigger picture of the entire forest behind it. Another image I use is of a tapestry, right? If you know what a tapestry is, it's got like a bunch of strings. If you're just looking at a single strand, a single moment in time of your life, and you're like, I don't understand how this fits, right? But when you step back and you're able to see and look back years and years in the future, and you look back on your life, you'll see the image of the entire tapestry beginning to unfold, right? The image of tapestry that's made up of individual moments. Anyway, back to school. There's a man. I went to college actually. So I made it through high school somehow. Made it into college. Started to kind of see potential. I started getting this idea of what I wanted to do with my life. And I wasn't the smartest person in the room, right? Definitely not the smartest, but I was determined, right? I always wanted to be pushed. So I didn't want the teachers who just pass you, right? That I got irritated if a teacher was too easy on me, or if they gave me a grade I didn't deserve. I wanted to have the teacher who was so hard that I barely passed the class. Because once again, I wanted to grow. There's a purpose to going through that too. It's kind of like working out. If anybody goes to work out, you have to put a certain amount of stress on your body, and you have to actually break down the muscles, and there's pain that comes from that in order to become stronger. And so the same thing applies to your academics, right? If you want to achieve something great in life, you have to start tearing yourself down a little bit, right? I say right a lot. I'm gonna try not to do that. My bad. I got to be a better speaker for y'all. But learning inside the classroom is not necessarily everything, right? It's a big part of it. It's an important part of it. But there's a man named Jim Rohn. He's a speaker, whatnot, and he had a quote. He said, "A formal education will make you a living, but self-education will make you a fortune, allow you to be successful and significant in all that you do, or have a significant impact in the world around you." Another image. I began reading a lot more my personal development, even outside of school. You kind of do your classes and all that, but that's like the bare minimum, right? Everything you do outside of that personal development, where you're finding books, or you're surrounding yourself with people, mentors who are already doing the things that you want to be doing, right? That's law of attraction, right? If people say law of attraction like it's some mystical force. It's not a mystical force. If you surround yourself with the people that you want to be like, or if you start reading the books that they read, and you start going to the places and doing the things that they're doing, Well, lo and behold, you'll probably start ending up becoming one of those people, because that's what you're surrounding yourself with, that immersion. That is the law of attraction. And so that's what I did. I started to surround myself. I started to let those people speak into me and not other people, right? I mean, a lot of your friends maybe right now, they're distracted by life, right? They're looking at, where do I find the most pleasure in this moment, right? Where, tonight or this weekend, and they're not really focused on what's coming. You need to have a different perspective, right? You think more of like there's, I think, one famous guy in history, I don't know who it was. He said, they asked him, if you want to cut down a tree and you only have 1 hour to do it, how would you do it? And he said, well, I spend the first 45 minutes sharpening my axe, right? Because the more he sharpens that axe, the easier the process is going to be to accomplish that feat that he wants to do. Another image might be the image of an archer, right? If you think of an archer with an arrow, bow and arrow, he's got to pull back on the arrow in order to launch it forward, right? And the harder that he pulls back on that arrow, the further that arrow is going to go. You apply that to goal setting as well. If this is all stuff that I was thinking about throughout my time in school, from about my senior year of high school through college. This is the stuff that I was pouring into my life to kind of prepare me to where I am today. If you think of your goal setting, like if your goal is a short-term goal, you're probably going to aim that arrow, that target right at the bullseye. But if that goal is maybe a few years down the road, if you have an idea of what you want your life to be about, or a certain level of achievement that you want in your life, you're going to have to aim higher because of that downward pull, that natural downward pull of mediocrity in our world. The gravity will pull that arrow down. And so the higher you aim that goal, you're going to achieve more than someone who's just like, oh no, I'll never achieve that goal, right? I want you to think about goals that are almost embarrassing to tell other people about, or maybe you even get a little scared to think that you might actually achieve that goal. That's a good goal. That's where you need to be focused. And that's kind of where I was. I knew I wanted to be at a certain level of financial achievement. I wanted to have a net worth I wanted to be a millionaire by age 30. Okay. I didn't make it by 30, made it after 30, but I probably wouldn't have made it at all if I wasn't aiming for that. I want a net worth these are just financial goals. You find whatever goals apply to your life that you want to achieve, whatever that significant is. But if you want to have like a net worth of 40 million, or you want to own 40 businesses by age 40, you kind of start building these goals that seem outrageous from where you're at right now. If I told my 16-year-old kid with no experience, called Oompa Loompa, mom didn't know how to put food on the table, house going into foreclosure, just very difficult. If I said, hey, you're going to be a millionaire at age 40, you're going to own multiple businesses at, this, I'd be like, no, I don't know. It's hard to believe. It's hard to believe because you don't see it around you, right? It's unrealistic because it's not tangible. It's not, you don't have that proximity, if that makes sense, to your life in order to believe it. So anyway, I went through school. How are we doing on time, by the way? I totally forgot to start a timer.
No, we're good. So if we wrap up on your presentation by 12:15, that would still give us 15 minutes for Q&As.
All right. Well, I'll try and get into actual tangible stuff for you to take away, but I just wanted to share a little bit about my life to kind of encourage you. After going to school, basically, I still did a lot of extracurricular activities, but I knew I wanted to kind of achieve this certain level, and I wasn't just going to be able to do it right out of school. And so for me, I knew the military was going to be an important step on the path of achieving what I wanted to achieve. And so I decided to go into the military. I went through officer candidate school. I did it backwards. I took student loans to go to college, and then I went to military, and they won't pay off my student loans. So just letting you know, I did it backwards. You can do it the other way, and actually the military will pay for your college. But anyway, just a thought. And you don't have to go to college. That's not for everyone. And by far, it's not for everyone. And a lot of people can succeed in life if they have that personal drive to achieve, if they have that pursuit of personal education, right? Like that's important. You can't just say, oh, I'm not going to read a book and I'll still be successful. Okay, that's silly. That's not going to happen. Don't think like that. But anyway, I knew I wanted to go to the military. I have a family history of military. And so I actually went into the Navy as an officer. I was an ordnance officer, basically meant, and gunnery officer meant you're in charge of all the weapons, all the ammunition, the missiles, all that stuff on board a destroyer, kind of the cool looking ship, anyway. And so that was pretty crazy. It was a very difficult experience though. The training portion, going through that basic training, that officer candidate school, the whole purpose of it is to tear you down, and they know how to do it, and they're really good at it, right? They are it's meant to be not only physically stressful but emotionally stressful. It's meant to break people. It's meant to make people give up, and so it's meant to separate those people who have that level of perseverance that say, I'm not going to let anything get in my way, and if I literally just collapse, like that's the level of commitment I have. If I'm just going to collapse in front of you because I'm giving you absolutely everything. That's who they're looking for. And that's what we want in our leaders. We want leaders who are committed to doing what it takes, right? And then a realization, the thing that helped me get through that was this realization that the entire purpose is to make me a leader. The entire purpose of walking through this very difficult situation of military training is meant to grow me into someone that I wasn't before. And I'll tell you, by the end of it, I was a different person. I was a much more confident person because I have achieved this. I have made it through. I had these people and amazing too. Think about leaders this way. That Marine gunnery sergeant drill instructor who trained me was terrifying in the beginning. This brick wall man was terrifying in the beginning. And by the end of that, and we were there for 12 weeks, I would have ran into a burning building for this guy. Like I would have died for this guy. And so it's amazing to see how this person could change people and take them to this new level by going through that experience. It was fascinating. But it was a very difficult experience too. Like I was tested constantly. You will be tested in life. You'll be tested with your integrity. You'll be tested with, just what you're willing to commit to. And I remember things don't always go how they're supposed to go in the military. We had certain leaders who were not, they would tear down people. Dale Carnegie has a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People, right? It's a great book. You should read it. One of his rules is never criticize, condemn, or complain to your employee, basically. You shouldn't have a boss who says, you effed up, you are so stupid. These are not bosses that inspire. You're not going to want to work harder for that guy. I remember there was one of our chiefs, one of our leaders, when he would walk into the room, the enlisted folks under me, they would cower. It would almost be like a dog who'd been kicked so much, right? That's how they would respond to his mere presence coming into the room. That is not leadership. That is fear, right? And that's not going to get them to accomplish great things. They're just going to be scared from you, and then they're going to talk about you and tear you down, right? This is the same guy who he would prefer that he tried to get me thrown off of inspections of my own equipment and stuff because he was worried that I would point out things that were wrong with my stuff. Right. And that is not how you want to approach these things. You want to identify problems. You want to be willing to accept responsibility for those things and then work towards resolutions. You don't want to hide that stuff. It's so silly. There's an inspection by the U.S. Congress that's meant to inspect the readiness of the fleet to fight the nation's wars, right? It's kind of a big deal. And I remember that, what would they do? They would go and scramble and kind of borrow parts from other ships just to make it look like we were good to go for the congressional inspection. And then as soon as they left, they would go give the parts back to another ship. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, this is so dumb. Why don't you just tell them we don't have what we need? Why don't you let them know that our training isn't up to par where it needs to be? And that way they can respond to that. But people were so fearful of their own resumes, of not looking like they themselves have succeeded, that they would hide. They would break their integrity. There was no honor there, right? And so these are things that I started to see, and I was like, I don't want to be a part of that. And I knew that I kind of wanted to exit the military. It wasn't going to be a career for me. I wanted to go into business. I wanted to kind of achieve that level of business success. And so I did that, and I got out of the military. Had a small family at the time when we got married, and so I went with a franchise concept to get into small business. Franchise just means that there are systems and processes already developed out by this company that basically give you a higher probability of success versus starting from scratch. Right. And so I just analyzed the situation. I did a risk assessment. As a young family, I want to take less risk, but I still wanted to take some risk by being an entrepreneur. So I went with this franchise concept, started a restoration company. very quickly knew that wasn't something I wanted to stay at, because you basically, I remember a moment where it was 2 o'clock in the morning and I was in someone's living room sucking up sewage that had overflowed from their toilet, right? I'm sucking up sewage and I'm thinking, this job sucks, right? Can I say that? Is this a public school, right? Anyway, all right. So, we're sucking up this, and I was like, oh man, how do I get out of this, right? Well, first off, I wanted to bring on more employees, right? So then I can begin to not work in the business, but begin to work on the business and growing the business. These are concepts that you see in the book E-Myth. I believe it's by Michael Gerber. He talks about moving from the technician phase of business ownership into the manager or into the entrepreneurship phase, where you can remove yourself from the stress of the day-to-day grind and begin to look at things more strategically so that you can begin to grow your organization, right? And so we did that. We began to bring on that team. And then I began to focus on the systems and processes, putting in automation and delegation, learn a lot of other things, learn a lot of these things from a book called 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss, how you can basically free up your mind by bringing in systems or softwares and technology, and that will free me up as the owner to begin to think more, to have that capacity of my mind to focus on the bigger picture and kind of taking us where we want to go. And that allowed me to start adding on new services to our company. So we moved into reconstruction, we moved into remodeling, we moved into roofing, and then eventually we moved into new construction. Where we're able to, I've got a project right now. We're building 166 homes up in Denison, Texas. These beautiful luxury homes, they're smaller homes, but luxury style homes for people. Would never have got there if I hadn't taken this incremental approach to being constantly focused on providing more value to the customers, right? These are concepts that you have to think about when you get to business for any of those business leaders that might end up in the room. But even outside of business, it's just, how do you provide more value? There's a quote by John Maxwell. He says, well, actually, no, sorry. I think this was Zig Ziglar or someone else in history. I'm not good at that citation stuff. But anyway, he said, if you help enough other people get what they want, you can have anything in life you want, right? So everything that you approach is this, you have this approach that says, I'm here to bring value. I'm not here to get, right? That's not my focus. And sure, that will happen. But I'm not coming into this, whatever situation you're in, to get, especially as a leader. As a leader, I'm coming into this and I'm specifically looking, how can I bring more value? Amazon has some leadership principles. Where is it? Let's see. Anyway, these are leadership principles. There's like 14 of them that they really care about. And I work with Amazon because I also have a delivery business separately. And one of them is about, insist on the highest standards, learn and be curious, invent and simplify. These are the types of things that, whatever I step into, I'm going to see, how can I bring more value? If I go to a restaurant, I'm going to provide them feedback, not to tear them down, but I'm going to say, hey, here are ways that you could do better. They can take that or leave that. And I noticed that. You'll notice some people, you'll offer them advice. You'll suggest to them, hey, here's a way you can be better. And some people will just leave it right there on the table and never look at it. They'll just be like, whatever, I don't care, not my problem. Especially hourly employees. They have no ownership sometimes. And you want to be an employee no matter what you do as you're growing on this, showing your leadership capacity or ability. You want to show that if someone gives you a problem or tells you there's a way to improve it, that you take ownership of that, and then you begin to implement those changes or bring those positive things to your leadership, showing the value. And that's where people will begin to identify you and say, wow, this guy has potential. This person has leadership ability. This girl is looking at an organization from the holistic perspective, taking ownership of the whole organization, even though they're only this hourly employee starting out. And so doors will begin to open for you as you do that, right? How are we doing on time? About 14 minutes. We basically, I'll just sum it up and kind of touch on it one more aspect. I started my logistics company in 2018. We had a beautiful opportunity to start from scratch, working with Amazon on this new program. All their delivery, all the the gray vans you see driving around, those are contracted to people like me. And most of the guys, they would come in there and they'd ramp up to like 20 vans over 4 months, right? I came in and I ramped up to 52 vans in less than 2 months. And so it was really eye-opening. Amazon's like, what's happening? And so they began looking at me and saying, how can Blake help Amazon, giant corporation, to better this program that they're doing. And so I had this opportunity to begin helping people across the country to build their businesses. I was able to consult over 200 small business owners with building these systems and processes that I had been studying for years before I actually implemented that, before I was able to turn that into something valuable that people would pay me for, right? But I just started giving it out for free, and I just started always helping people, and that was just who I was about. And then I was able to build this a little small Facebook community that grew to 1,400 business owners, where we're doing this thing called open innovation. We're bringing our problems. We're not afraid to talk about our problems. But when we bring a problem, then there's 1,400 other people that can provide solutions or speak into that. And so it accelerates the innovation process that then Amazon was able to build out their program over the past 5 years to this incredible thing that they have now. Just from the work, like I had a tangible impact on that. It goes back to that, help enough other people get what they want. Well, out of all that consulting, I was able to build a management company. At one point, we were running 10% of Amazon's delivery network. They kept growing, we didn't, so it was only a quick moment. And then out of that, I was able to build an affiliate marketing business. And that just means I was able to help other people get things that they needed, and I would get paid for helping them do that. And I got paid a lot of money for helping them do that, just because I built this reputation of always helping other people, of being someone people can trust to improve their business. And these are the things that I want you to think about as a leader. Everything that you step into, how do you bring value? Also remembering, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? So it starts with bringing value to them, showing that you're genuinely interested in the other person. That's Dale Carnegie as well. And then you'll start to reap those benefits over time. Let's move to Q&A, say. Is that a good transition point?
Yeah, no, this is perfect. So what I'm going to do now for all the students is open up the chat for anyone who has a question. That way the councilman can go through and pick the ones that he feels best to answer, or so and so. So we'll go from there.
All right, I'm supposed to get on chat here. Let me see.
Yeah, no, and if it's easier for you, I know that you're tagging in on the phone. I can read out some of the questions that are coming out if that works for you.
Yeah, for me, because my computer's kind of frozen up there, and let's just do that. Go.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and for the reference, folks, we're going to answer questions that you have a lot of great questions. The goal would be questions. The objective would be questions that are related to leadership in particular. However, if there's any that are business related, I think that there's a lot of merit to that as well for y'all that want to start your own ventures. Okay, we got one that's interesting, and this could tie into leadership. So what inspired you to join the military? And then I'm going to add to that question, what inspired you to join the military as an officer versus an enlisted man?
Sure. Actually, I tried for 2 years to become an officer through the Air Force, and they didn't select me. So I was faced with rejection after canceled board after canceled board. Finally, I actually said, you know what, maybe I will just enlist. I just thought I wanted to be an officer because I wanted that leadership experience, right? To be in that leadership role. And so I actually began the process of enlisting, and I was at MEPS up in Dallas, and I was maybe 1 hour away from taking my oath when the officer recruiter contacted me and said, hey, the Navy officer recruiter talked to me, said, hey, you haven't given the Navy officer program a chance. And I said, well, I didn't think y'all like me, but we can do it. And I tried that, and I got in with the Navy officer program. But the main thing to do there, I wanted to serve my country no matter what way it was, whether it was enlisted or commissioned. However, I had a college degree. I had my MBA at that time, and you're eligible to be an officer, and you get paid more, and you have that leadership role, and it's a different experience, right? And so that's the main reason why I wanted to go through that route versus the enlisted route. My brother is enlisted. He's been enlisted for 18 years. He loves it. It's his life, his passion. That was not me. I knew I wasn't going to be a lifer. I was just going to do it for a period of time, and it worked out well for me.
That's awesome. So we're actually getting some really cool questions about leadership. I'm going to try to tackle as many of them as possible giving them to you because we're getting close to the end. So let me see. Here we are. So what are 3 most important habits of a successful entrepreneur? Which of your decisions as a leader has proven to be the most difficult?
Man, those are 2 really hard ones. I'm going to do the last one first. Which decision as a leader has proven to be the most difficult? Um, I mean, for me, I'm going to answer it like this. My tendency, if y'all know Myers-Briggs, it's the personality testing, right? I kind of fall right down the middle of an ENTJ and an ENFJ, and that's basically the executive businessman, military leader versus the mentor and coach, right? Teacher even. And so I'm constantly back and forth. My tendency on the military side is to treat people like drones, is to or robots, to treat people as if they were a means to my end, right? And so I begin to lose sight of the person, of what I call the imago Dei. Like, this person is made in the image of God, in my opinion, how I believe it. And so remembering to treat everybody this way, and even if they fail me, right? And when you are when something is riding on someone else's performance and they fail, I get very frustrated. And so I want to take out that frustration on that person. And so one of my biggest failures personally as a leader is going through a point in my life when I was so stressed out about things. I had multiple businesses running at one time, and I began to just basically white people to the side. You know what I mean? Like, here, get out of here. I remember one time, and this is very embarrassing, but I actually, like, someone said something and I fired them. And then I posted a GIF on our little work chat of Thanos snapping his finger and the person disappearing. And I was like, and then he called me out on it because someone showed him afterward, after I'd fired him or whatever. He actually tested me and says, "Is that what you represent? Like, you claim to be this person who cares about other people." And he called me out, and man, that was crushing, right? And he was right. And so remembering to approach all people, like remembering that they're people first, and that everyone has their own set of problems that they're dealing with and stresses going on in their life. So just remembering to do that. So I went through a phase of my life where I was too focused on, what I want, and not actually focused on caring for the people that have been given to me to steward, if that makes sense. What was the other question? It was about three things.
Yeah, no, let me find that again. So basically the student was asking, what are the three most important habits of a successful entrepreneur?
Well, gosh, off the top of my head, the first thing is definitely going to be reading, right? Leaders are readers. You hear that a lot. You cannot rely on just your schooling. You can't do it. Like, most people, they graduate school, they graduate college, and then they never pick up another book, and then they wonder why they haven't achieved a certain level of success in their life, of leadership in their life, right? And it's because they haven't actually invested. Like, you are literally doing the bare minimum to graduate. Like, that's just the key to open the door. But in order to actually walk through the door and to have greater and greater opportunities, you have to invest in yourself. Jim Rohn, I think it is, he also talks about the economy, and, like, people have, this isn't talking about their value as a person, but a person's value to the marketplace is determined by, they can do things to increase their value to the marketplace. And one of those things for leaders is just investing in themselves. And they do that through reading books, listening to podcasts, audiobooks, whatever, going to seminars, going to conferences, surrounding yourself with mentors, attaching yourself to people who have already achieved a level of leadership, right? And then in learning from them, right? And then taking risk. So you've got maybe reading, and then taking risk is like the second most critical thing that you can do. If you're too afraid of failure, right? And failure is like absolutely 100% going to happen. And there's actually approaches to failure where it's intentional destruction or intentional failure. Like, you're trying to see how quickly you can fail at certain things, so you can get through the process of learning how something works. And so it's actually intentional. There's Jack Welch was the CEO, I believe, of General Electric, I think it was. And I believe there was a vice president who made this massive $40 million failure. They lost $40 million as a company based on this guy's decision, right? And he came to Jack Welch, came up to his desk in his big, office, and he laid his letter of resignation on the table. And Jack Welch took it and he tore it up in front of the guy. And he said, "Listen, I'm not letting you leave. I just invested $40 million in your education," right? So think about that. To have the perspective that failure is it's a cost of tuition. It's like going to school. I'm learning from that experience, and I'm a better person on the other end of that failure. It is not something to be feared. It is not something to be avoided necessarily, right? You're not trying to fail. You want to achieve whatever you're doing, but like you're not worried about failure because that's just another step on getting the way to Thomas Edison, thousand ways not to invent a light bulb. That some reporter asking, how did you fail 1,000 times? He's like, no. I found 1,000 ways not to invent a light bulb on his way to inventing the light bulb, right? And then just look at around, like he's changed the world or whatever. So that's the second thing. And then the third is back to the Amazon stuff, like having this focus on continual improvement. You should despise complacency, right? I'm not talking about like being content with your life. That's a separate issue. Like I'm content with my life no matter if I never get another level of success, if I lose everything in my life, I am content because I have everything that I need. And so but contentment complacency in leadership, you think of a plane that's traveling, right? Well, if that plane, if the engines cease, right, there's only one way that plane's going to go, right? If those engines stop moving that plane forward and projecting that plane forward, then that plane is going to come down eventually, right? And that's the same thing that happens in leadership. You have to be so focused on providing value to whether it's customers or to your organization or whatever it is, you're focused on that's the driving force behind everything. And you're constantly looking to invent new ways of doing things, of simplifying processes, of creating new products and services, or providing, even in nonprofits, like finding easier ways. I'm working with some nonprofits right now as a city councilman and whatnot. And it's like, we had a lady who left an abusive domestic violence relationship, and she's homeless right now. She's got 6 kids, and homeless situation in everywhere is just it's through the roof. It's really bad right now because of affordable housing crisis. And so I'm trying to, like, how does she find a place to live? You know what I mean? How do just temporary housing or whatever? And it's so difficult. It's such a complicated process. And I can't imagine being in the midst of the situation trying to navigate this. So I'm over here just saying, hey, this isn't none of my business, but how do we make this easier for people? You know what I mean? Like for your nonprofit organization to connect with these needy people who need to work with you. And I'm over here just being part of the city saying, I just want to take care of our people, right? So finding ways to go out of your way and provide value everywhere. I think that's maybe the 3 things. So it's like reading and not afraid of failure and providing value constantly, something like that.
No, that's incredible. So I know we're getting close to the end of the session. Before we wrap up, I do want to tackle a few good questions the students asked. One of the first one would be, and if there's any way you can answer them as fast as you can, I'm going to list them out real quick. They're not too complicated. The first one is, can fear be used positively as a leader? The second one would be, how do you manage a conflict situation? And then if you have time in the next minute or two, what career mistake has given you the biggest lesson? So hopefully we can tackle at least 2 of those.
I think fear can be used positively as long as it's not putting fear in another person, but it's putting fear in your own life. So the fear of not coming through, and this is a bad thing and a good thing. Like the fear of me not being able to provide for my family is a driving force in wanting to achieve a certain level of success, right? However, if that has become ultimate, if this gets more into a spiritual conversation, which we don't have to get into, but I need to make sure that I don't find my security in my achievements as myself, right? I need to make sure that my security is coming from something else that has a firmer foundation. So that type of fear, it can be motivating, but it can also be scary and harmful to yourself. So I don't know, but I would say we're not meant to put fear in someone else necessarily. That's not my type of success. Leaders are about developing other leaders. They're about improving the world around them. So I don't know. And maybe if I thought about it a little more, I'd have a different answer. But the second one, what was that one? Can you remind me real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. In the last minute, this will probably have to be the last one. How do you manage a conflict situation? And this is probably going to be beneficial to a lot of high schoolers that are in leadership roles.
Sure. Gosh, I think the first thing to do, one of the best things I think you could do is, can you restate the other person's argument in their own words in a way that they would agree with, right? if you have two people, especially like politicians today, you have to be able to approach whatever the situation is and be able to say, and it's so hard, but you have to be able to say the other person's argument in a way that they would agree with. So you're building their case. And when you do that, you're able to actually build this trust with the other person. Patrick Lencioni in the book, I don't know if it was from the Five Dysfunctions of a Team, there's a quote, he says, trust makes conflict the pursuit of truth, right? And so when you start to be able to build, like I'm coming into a city council in which everyone else wanted the other guy to win. And so now I'm coming in as the outsider, and somehow I have to build a relationship with these other guys that I work with, these other folks that I work with, to where we can actually accomplish good things for the city. So that's going to require me to build trust with these other people, even though we have this conflict on the election, right? But in order to, and then when we have that trust, we can say, hey, I think it should be this way. And this person will say, I think it should be this way. And we're going to thresh that out, and we're going to come to a better solution on the other side. So I think that's the main thing you do. Build trust with the other person, care about them genuinely, right? You care about that person, and be able to restate their arguments. You've got humility in your own, you're secure in who you are, that you're able to basically put yourself on the line by restating that argument with the fear that you might be wrong, but you want to try to understand it. And I do want to say one last thing, and I'll get off. Biggest failure in COVID, I was stretched too far, too quickly. We were doing so well, and COVID hit, and I thought e-commerce was booming, and so I wanted to get into other businesses. So I launched a trucking company and a FedEx company on top of my Amazon company. On top of this, like I had a management company going as well, and I was just like stretching all over the place. And I remember I had this moment. I went to church, and I dropped off my family at the front, and then I went and parked the car. And then when I walked in, my wife was like, "Where's Isaac? Where's our baby?" And I'm like, "Oh shoot, I left him in the car." Like, and it was just like a shock experience to my system, where the level of stress I had put on my life as I was trying to do all of these things, which are good things, right? But that level of stress was beginning to have an impact and actually affecting other people. And so my encouragement to y'all is like, don't stretch too much on that rubber band. Like, don't go too quick. Don't try to achieve so much, or that you start forgetting about what the true priorities of your life are, which is, taking care of your family and yourself and those types of things. So cool.
No, this is incredible. I really appreciate your time. I know the students do. I noticed that a lot of students are probably having to head out now, run to their next class. So we do appreciate y'all tagging in for a moment. Thank you again, Mr. Vaughn, for this. For anyone that's still in the session and in the chat, if you haven't had a chance yet and you're interested, definitely complete the link form below. So that way, TILBM, we can figure out how to connect you with career mentors and get that ball rolling. And with that, hey, I really appreciate everything. Thank you, sir.
See you guys. Vote.